And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel. Today we're taking a look at Wizards Academy. Wizards Academy is a game that initially, even though it has a really cool picture of a bear wizard on the front, did not really catch my eye. Mostly because I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's another game where there's rooms and you're moving around in the rooms as wizards casting spells. Yay, I have seen that a million times before. But when I gave it a play, I found that it was different than I expected. First of all, it's a cooperative game. You're all working together, and you actually are all new wizards. You are attempting to learn spells. So you are basically putting two elements together, casting it, and seeing what the spell is. Doesn't always work the way you want it to, so you need to figure out what does work, and you need to figure it out quickly. Here's how the game plays. Okay, now this is not the exact setup for a scenario for a game, but there's lots of different scenarios, and I'm showing you kind of basically what you're going to do. Each person, there's usually the mana crystal here, which you're trying to rescue or save, and you're trying to accomplish some sort of goal. So sometimes you need to cast a specific spell. That's the basic game. Get back to the room to cast that spell. And you have spells here. Now this is like the full version of the game. You may not have this many spells out. You got level 1 spells in the first 6 spots, and level 2s, then 3s, and then 4s. And the spells and everything else is going to be specific to the scenario. Like there's a whole pile of disaster cards. And some of the disaster cards are going to be used depending on whatever scenario you're going to be using at any point in time. Just like the spell cards. You're going to have spell cards. Then the scenario is going to tell you which spell cards to choose from. So each character is going to, or each player is going to be a character. So you're going to take a look at your character. The characters have special abilities that they can use, and it also has different places. If you get a wand, for example, you can then use that. So this is a place to keep track of that. But you have these different characters, and each character comes with a miniature, and you're going to be using these miniatures and moving around on the board, trying to accomplish the goal. It's a cooperative game. And on your turn, you have a few actions. You can move from one room to the next, provided that there are doors connecting them. And in many of these rooms, you're going to find these glyphs. And in one of these glyphs, you can collect a mana of that type. So once you have a mana of that type, and let's say I have 2 of these purple mana, I can cast a spell, the purple to purple spell. So I'll cast that spell. Let's see what it is. It's a blast. Do 2 damage to a target in your room, or 1 damage to a target in an adjoining room. Destroy all ice tokens in the target room. Fantastic. So now everyone at the table knows that whenever you cast a purple, that's going to do that. Now, there is cards at the beginning of each player's turn. They have to play a disaster card, like I said. Many of these disaster cards are going to be activate threats, which means if there's any monsters or anything in these rooms, it happens. At the beginning of the game, that's not a problem. But other cards will then show up. Imp invasion, and then imps, little imps, will start popping up in different rooms. And many times this game will have you do random rooms, and you'll just draw a card from a location deck, and it will show you what room and what direction the different creatures will come and do different things in. Or fire might break out on the board in different rooms, or water might flood some of the rooms. Different things will happen, and once you've gone through the disaster deck, you'll add more cards to it from another pile. And when that other pile runs out and you go through the disaster deck for the final time, the game is over. So the first thing a player does in a turn is they reveal a disaster card. Then they take their 2 actions, and they're going to be mostly running around. Maybe they'll take a room action. So this room action says pay 5 glyphs to acquire a staff, matching any 2 of them. So I can get a specifically colored staff. And once I have that, I'll mark it on my sheet in this room. So you can take the room action, or you can get the glyphs and do that. And as you go higher and higher, usually you can only cast level 1 spells first, and until you beat the Guardian, then you'll be able to start casting level 2s. The Guardians are basically just immobile guys. They're not coming after you, but you got to somehow destroy them. Here, this level 2 spell says, perform the library's bind spell action. Well, that's a great thing. The library, by the way, binds a spell, which means you can turn a spell over, like this blast earlier, and that's going to be there, and that's going to always be double purple, no matter what. Why does that matter? You say, well, just remember it. Well, first of all, my memory might not be as good as yours, but secondly, one of the disaster cards will have you shuffle an entire section of spells. So it might have you shuffle all the level 1 spells. You shuffle and redeal them out, which now means you don't know what spell you're going to cast. So this one here teleports you to the mana crystal. That's great if that's where you mean to go. But if you didn't know what you're doing and you cast a blue-blue or a blue-purple, you get to move extra spaces and dash. And this one here, Ward, you can draw the top 3 cards and do different things. But some of these spells are amazing and some are going to be bad. Here's an invasion and a troll shows up when you do this. And an imp portal. I don't want to do that. But if I cast the yellow-orange spell, that's what I've done. So you have to be very cautious when you're trying to cast big spells. Transmogrify, here you can select a creature and replace it with a different creature. Fantastic. I can take a demon and change it to an imp. That's a whole lot easier to fight. That's a much better spell. Here's another haste spell, which gives everyone more speed. This level 4 spell lets me create a staff that I can use. This one here, banish, remove all darkness or haunt tokens in your room, which is a pretty powerful thing, especially if you have haunt and darkness tokens. Here, put a fire portal in one adjacent room and a water potion, and now fire and water are going to be coming out of those, cataclysm. So again, this is not all random. The game is going to tell you what spells to use. And there's usually going to be a few bad spells that you don't want to cast. Like you might start fire in a room or something. And there's also going to be good spells, which lets you attack things or teleport around the board. And you got to figure out what the good spells are. Go to the library so that you can bind them in their spots. And then start going to those spots, collecting these. You also need to hopefully cast water to put out fire. Water will slow you down, but fire can be deadly. In scenario 1, for example, you need to find a specific spell, go back to the mana crystal and cast that spell and have no fire tokens on the board. So basically you are trying to figure out the spell to put out the fire because you will likely start a fire by accident as the game goes by. And then you need to find that spell, which is a level 2 spell. So you're only going to be using these spells at the beginning of the game, which is a pretty small grid. And that's pretty much how the game plays. Each scenario is going to be a little bit different, and the game comes with a grimoire. Here, this isn't the rule book, but this is like an additional book which gives you all different specific scenarios and also tells you how each of the spells work in case you run into it, or how, for example, fire, water, darkness, and haunt tokens work in the game. How the 3 creatures, there's only 3 creatures, imps, trolls, and demons, how each of them works and how they also move around the board. And that's pretty much it. You're going to be working together cooperatively to stop some sort of threat while casting a spell. What does a spell do? Ghosts! A haunt token in my room. Whoops. Sorry, that was a bad spell. Let's cast this one. It said fire portal. I just started everything on fire. Bad thing. Let's try this one. It said water portal. I'm not a very good wizard. I am actually very pleasantly surprised with this game. See, there's a lot of things I like about this game, but the mostly is the grid. There's a very old game, Attack from the Green Aliens in Outer Space or something like that, from Tom Wham, in which there are aliens invading a ship, and you find different weapons, or just different stuff on the ship, like kerosene. Let's throw it on the aliens, and sometimes it helps the aliens, and other times it hurts them, and you have to figure out which things are effective weapons. That's how this game is first. You're like, all right, I got 2 different elements. Let's cast them and see what happens. Ooh, that's bad. Let's not do that again. Or like, ooh, that's really cool. Now let's use it. And then you have to decide, are we going to lock this spell into place? Or no, we'll just remember where it is, because eventually the spells will be mixed up and you can't afford that. And I really find that fascinating. It's basically a race game. The bad things at the beginning are very minor. You're just moving around, learning your feet, and then you're casting the spells, and some of the spells go haywire, but eventually you find the right ones that will let you defeat those guardians, which are guarding the other elements, which then lets you get to level 3 and 4, and level 5, the level 2s and 3s and 4 spells, which are bigger spells. And I find the whole thing is just really neat because you're sitting around casting spells. And when you cast a spell, you can even take an element from somebody else. So if I have like a green, I'm like, hey, can I use your blue? Okay, let's see what happens, and put them together. And that's a neat concept. It's a very cooperative game. You're all working together. There's a smidge of memory involved, but it's not that difficult because you'll remember which spells are good quickly. And if you really want to know, you can always go to the library and turn them face up. It is a difficult game. And there is a portion of luck involved in the game. You're going to get to points where when you go and you find something and you're like, yeah, I just did this and this was exciting and this spell works, and oh no, imps just came out of that corner over there and I wasn't prepared for that and we can barely get back there. And I think if there's a flaw in the game, and sometimes I think you'll lose based on nothing that you've done. Or you're going through the spells one by one and it's the last spell you check, and like, oh, well, now we finally got what we needed, but we took a lot more time. That would be the biggest fall, is occasionally when you're randomly looking for the spell you need, it might be in the very last place you look. And in a game where there's a time thing and bad events are happening, that's not as useful. But still, a lot of cooperation, people working together, finding the different elements that they need for the spells, looking at the rooms, using the rooms. There's a lot of information in the game, but it's not too overload, because while you have a lot of spells to cast, you actually need to get the resources for them. You only have a few actions, so are you going to go prepare? You're going to help somebody else out with their spells? Are you going to go get in spot and hopefully take out the guardians or take out the imps? Are you going to be the person to go handle the fire that's been spreading out of control? And I like it. I think it could have been streamlined in parts probably. And the rule book could have been probably written better. But overall, it feels fresh and interesting. I really like the idea of having a spell book where you're just experimenting. So that's what those two elements do. Let's put out the fire. And that's fun and unique. So it has a nice spin on the cooperative genre, and I think it's one that people should check out. That's Wizards Academy. Dice Tower Judgment, approved!
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!